Hi, it's Will from stormthecastle.com, and here on YouTube you know me as Epic Fantasy. And this is my latest tutorial. This is a sword making tutorial, and it is how to make Sting from the Hobbit right here, out of steel. Right, that's real steel. I didn't do much forging, blacksmithing with it. All I did was harden and temper the blade. All of this is, cut by hand and made by hand. Fun project. Quite a bit of work. You may have seen my other tutorial on how to make a foam board Sting right here. Right, I have that if you want to watch that video, or you want to check out the web tutorial on my website, how to make a foam board one if you want to just make one like that, or how to make the steel one. It's pretty interesting. I hardened and tempered it in the forge. Wooden handle. It's all very nice. That's Coca-Cola wood, aluminum pommel. Fun project. Thanks for watching my videos. Thanks for subscribing to my channel. If you're a subscriber, if you're not a subscriber, hit that button. Always lots of fun and interesting stuff. Let me see. I much appreciate it. Leave a comment. If you have questions, ask questions. Thank you very much. Let's launch into the introduction. Fun project. I really enjoyed this. Oh, and I also put a light in it. Just for fun, you're wondering what this is right here? That's a blue LED. Let me hit that. That is a blue LED. So, there are goblins near it. Actually, somewhat lights up. just for kind of like kicks. So let's launch into the intro, and then we'll do how to make Sting from the Hobbit. Just in time for the movie. Let's get a look at this. There we go. Let's do it. Dioramas, origami, catapults, and trebuchets, telescopes, terrariums, bonsai trees, and paper games, swords and shields, and real blacksmithing, model rockets, animation. I teach the art of real creation. stormthecastle.com. Let's make something. Okay, let's launch into how to make Sting. There are 4 parts to this project. There is the blade, there is the guard, there is the pommel, and then there is the handle. So I'll show you how to make all 4 of those parts, and then I will show you how to assemble them together into a sword. But let's get going on the sword making process. Just as in every other tutorial I do, I start with some drawings so I can understand how it's going to look, what the shape and configuration is, and how it's going to be. And it's very important to do that. Once I got it figured out, then I make myself a full-scale drawing, carefully measured out so I know what every single piece is going to be like. It's important to do this. And we're going to use this drawing as a template, which will help us cut the steel and the aluminum correctly. A lot of fun. I'll enjoy this part of the process. See? Now we need to get those drawings over to steel somehow, and how we do that is with tracing paper. So I put my tracing paper on it, and I'm going to actually do several of these because we're going to use them over and over. I'll explain more about that. And it's pretty interesting, the sword making process. Along with making Sting, I'm also showing you how to make a sword in this whole tutorial. It's kind of interesting. In 17 minutes, I'm going to show you how to make a sword. So let's break open the steel and the aluminum foil. The aluminum. The steel is 1/8 inch thick, 3 inches wide, and 36 inches long. The aluminum is 60-61. It's 1 inch thick and 2 inches wide. And I've cut out that pattern for the blade, which we're going to start with the blade first. I've cut out that pattern, and I'm gluing it to the steel. Now we can use that to cut the steel to the shape we want. So let's get busy with the hacksaw. And you're going to see a repetitive pattern here when we're working with sword making or steel work or aluminum work. Is we start with the heavier tools and we work our way down to finer and finer tools, refining the edges and the cut. So just keep a hacksaw on. And there's a trick I wanted to show you is I have the blade mounted sideways in that hacksaw, if you can see that. It allows you to get into certain areas that can't be reached with the normal hacksaw configuration. So cut out that blade. Looks good, tang and everything. It's one complete piece. And then clean it up. And I'm really happy with how that came out. It looks really good. And then we put a bevel on it. Now I didn't go crazy with the bevel because I'm not sharpening this sword. I passed it around, I showed the people, I'm not putting an edge on it. But I put a nice bevel on it like that, it looks good. See the bevel around the edge? So belt sander is perfect for that. And just take your time. Takes a little bit of practice to get this. So now let's heat treat that blade. Let's crank up the sword forge. And I do have a tutorial on how to make this on my website. It's stormthecastle.com. If you want to know how to make a sword forge like that. It's a long forge for forging swords. Whereas the small round forge wouldn't work. So let's put Sting right in there and get it red hot. We want to get it to something called Curie temperature, which is where the molecules change in the steel and harden it. This step is hardening the sword. And you know it's hard because of the red color, but also you put a magnet to it and the magnet no longer sticks and you know it's at the correct temperature. Look at that. Is that not beautiful or what?
Looks good.
That is just about ready. So 2 steps to this. We're harden, and then I will show you, then we temper it, which means we soften it back up. But for now, let's harden it. Once it's up to temperature, you dip it in a quench. Now that quench is that little white thing over there. I don't know if you can see it. I have used motor oil in that. For this type of steel, you use oil to quench. And what that does is it locks in the hardness, which is terrific. Hardness means it's going to have a certain amount of durability. It's going to keep an edge, but it's going to be brittle too. So we're going to soften it back up in a process called tempering. And how we do that is by the color of the steel. So clean off all that scale that's built up on it. It's real easy to do. Get the silver shining through again. And now we're going to heat it a second time, but only to about 500 degrees. And that softens the steel back up a little bit so it has some play and some give and some flexibility. So 2 steps, harden and tempering. And we temper by putting it near the fire like this. See how I have it braced up on steel? But it's not directly in the fire. We slowly heat it up to about 500 degrees, and we know it's at the right temperature when it changes to a wheat color. Now you got to keep an eye on it so the tip doesn't overheat, because the smaller parts of steel will heat quicker. So once it's that wheat color, we quench it again. Now let's take a look at this. I'll show you what I mean by wheat color. Now some of this, see the wheat color in the center there? Some of this is also a plum color. That means I over-tempered it a little bit. It's a little bit softer than I would like it. That means the temperature climbed up a little bit more than we wanted, but that's okay. I'm not going to actually fight with this sword. So that's it. It's hardened and tempered. Let's clean it up and polish it. And it's really easy at this point to polish it up. We use emery paper and we go through our various grits. I start with 100 grit, clean it all up, move on to 180 grit, clean it all up. And I only went as far as 180 grit, but you can go on to 220 grit, 300 grit. If you've seen my other knife making or sword making tutorials, sometimes I go as high as 1200 grit. If you want to get a mirror-like shine on it. But it looks pretty good at this point. A lot of elbow grease in here. Just for that was like 4 hours of work. So we're done with the blade. Now let's move on to the guard, the second part. Same thing as before. I made my template. That's tracing paper. I put it on my aluminum block and then I cut it out with rough tools. Hacksaw at it like crazy. After working with steel, it's almost a joy to move on to aluminum because it's so much easier to cut. So yeah. Now this is rough cut. And because of all the oil we're using to cut it and the WD-40 and whatnot, if your template is ruined, just take that old one off and put a new piece on. So because at this point we want to get it down to the right shape, we need our pattern to be clear and neat. So don't be afraid to change the, scrape off the old one and put a new one on, just like this. I ended up doing this another time even, because you have to see those edges. And then I moved on, now I talked about this earlier in the video, then I moved on to finer tools. Now I'm using a small coping saw to get that nice curve, and a belt sander to start to get the final, see how it's right on the line there? get it down to its final shape on one side here. It takes some time. Then from here we move on to files. We get it right down to its final shape. You can even use a jeweler's saw at some point. So let's engrave the elven inscription on it. And I did this by writing it out first with a marker. And then carving it out with a Dremel. And that's an engraving tip. And the aluminum is pretty easy to work with. Although it does take some time, I forget. It was like, all told for both sides, it was around 8 hours of dremeling. See, and then now the letters I didn't carve, I actually carved the spaces around the letters, which leaves the letters embossed. See how they stand up like that? It looks really good. So that part is done. Let's fit this guard to the sword, which means it slides over the tang. And how we do that is by drilling a series of holes in it to make a slot. And you'll see what I mean by that. And then I use the Dremel to cut out that slot. And then now, this is an interesting thing about this sword is that the blade actually fits right into the guard. So I had to cut out a slot on the front end of it like this. So the blade slides right in just like this. This is really neat like that. See how that looks? It has a really good fit. I really like that. So I Dremeled that out, and it took some time. But well worth the effort. So now we're done with the guard. Let's move on to the pommel. Same thing applies. Our same aluminum block. Cut out the rough shape of the pommel with various tools. And then used a rough file to a half round file to get the shape, the major shape of it, and then I moved on to a really small file to finish it off. And then of course this has to slide over the tang too, just like our guard did. So I did the same thing. I cut a series of holes in the pommel and then drilled it out to make a slot. Okay, you've been watching this video for 12 minutes now. Thanks for sticking with me. See, it fits over like that. It's going to go right over. See how that assembles? If you didn't understand how a sword is made, that's how it's made. So we're done with the pommel. Let's move on to the final piece, which is the handle. That's cocobola wood. It's 2 inches by 2 inches by 12 inches. Nice hardwood. And it's going to go on just like this. So I drew guidelines on it, so the tang will fit in there snugly. And right in the center of that piece is we're going to do the same thing we did with the other pieces. We're going to drill a series of holes to make a slot so it fits right over the tang. But see how that's at an angle, so you've got to be careful with that. The tang tapers. So I mounted this in the vise at an angle so the drill holes follow that taper. And you're like, hey, how the heck am I going to drill that? That's way too long. It's actually 5.5 inches long. See the series of holes to start my slot? I got myself an extra long drill to drill that out. See that extra long drill? I think that's an electrician's drill bit. And then just kept working at it. It takes a little time, but hey, after working with steel and then aluminum, now working with wood is a piece of cake. Just keep working at it. The same diameter as the tang, and so it fits just like this. It's beautiful. See that? It's starting to look like a sword now, isn't it? So we need to shape that handle. See ya? So we want it to fit snugly against the guard, so I drew out guidelines and then rasped those down with a wood rasp. See, that slot looks beautiful. And then it's time to shape the actual handle. And we do this late in the process because we want to see how it
fits, and we keep it on the sword so we know how it fits against the garden, against the pommel, because it's all got to be custom fit. That handle, that wood piece, is fit around everything else. See how the pommel doesn't quite fit yet? So I just keep rasping it down until it fits in there snugly. Because this sword is kind of unique in the way that pommel goes. How it slides in. So yeah, it looks really good. I keep rasping it. It was a lot of work here. I ended up using small files. It took me like, I couldn't tell you. To get that handle to fit right, it must have been about 6 hours of work. Just slowly fitting that handle into the pommel. So that's it. Now we do something called burning in the handle. That's to get a really good fit on the tang. And what you do is you heat up the tang as hot as you can get it. And I use a blowtorch. And keep that guard on there, that's important. And then you slide the wooden handle right on that tang so it heats up and it burns the wood. And then that makes a custom fit. That's called heating in the handle. Now we just need to bend over the end of the tang so it's locked in place nice and tight and your whole assembly is tight. So heat that up and then hammer it over. And it takes a while to get that thing hot enough to bend. So, your sword is made. Now we move on to detail work. Polish the handle with multiple coats of tung oil. Brings out that grain in that cocobola. And then we add the leaf pattern, and what I did was I made a paper one first so I could get the curl right around the sword, around the handle, so I knew what the right size were, where all the leaf patterns were. And then I cut it out of aluminum tape. And then glued it on. Well, it has a sticky backing. And then that's not going to stay, particularly if you're handling it. Of course, it's a handle. So I sealed it all up with PVA glue, with white glue, to hold it all down, and it dries nice and clear so it doesn't, you know, blur it. Okay, let's take a quick look at the inscription on the blade. We start out by breaking it up into 3 sections so it's easy to lay out in Elvish writing, and then laid in all those letters and the pattern with pencil. From there, it's a matter of testers, enamel paint, and painting over the lettering. And this is at 500 speed, so you just get a quick look at it. See it? And you have to have a steady hand when you're doing this, particularly these lines here. Right here. But it looks good. That double line is tricky. Once that paint is dried, we can erase all the pencil marks. And that's it. That's it. We have made Sting. Let's take a look at it. Just like that. I like it. If you make this sword, send me a picture. I have other sword making tutorials. I have knife making tutorials. I have blacksmithing tutorials. I have other Lord of the Rings projects. Thanks for watching. Let's take a look at some of my other projects right here. Crap.